Expect the unexpected.
Mosquitoes. The most mosquitoes I've ever seen.
Floating down a river getting leeches to release off of you is not fun.
It starts on a cool day. It was a Friday. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I remember thinking, this day went so smoothly. Like, this is just like, wow, this Friday is going to start my weekend off good. The day was ending. The lifeguards were blowing the whistle for everybody to get out. And we were lining up and we were doing roll. I was counting, make sure we had all the kids. And we were about to get on the bus and go back to camp. When one of my younger campers taps on my arm and he's like, I need to go to the bathroom. And I was like, okay, let's go. I grab his hand. We're scurrying over to the bathroom and he suddenly slows down and he stops and he's like, I don't have to go to the bathroom anymore. And I was like, did you have an accident? And he was like, yeah. I was like, okay. Look down. He didn't wet his pants. So I was like, okay, we have a big problem we have to deal with here. We panic, or I panic. So I was like, okay, I guess go into the bathroom, close the door, take off your pants. We're gonna throw away your underwear. We'll talk to your parents about this later. It'll be all good. And he's like, okay. And so he goes into the bathroom and I hear this noise and this poop falls on the ground. And when I tell you it doesn't mathematically make sense, the size of this poop and the size of this kid, I was like, did your parents feed you a buffet the last 3 days and it's just been in there and it just all came out right now? He like puts his pants back on and he opens the door and I'm like, we can't just leave because there is a huge, like an adult-sized poop on the ground and I'm gonna be the last one seen walking out of here and they are for sure gonna think it's me. Of course, this is in a pool bathroom and there's no paper towels, there's only hand dryers. And so I'm like, okay, toilet seat covers, grab the toilet seat covers, grab like a thick stack, and then I grab his underwear and I pile those together and I grab the poop and I just like throw it in the trash. I'm like, done. And he like looks at me and he's like, don't tell anybody about this. I'm like, trust me, dude, I don't even know how to form the words to tell anybody about this. Like, his dad shows up and I'm like, hey dude, we had a situation with your son. And I tell him what happened and he says, oh yeah, that's been happening recently. And I'm like, expect the unexpected. With kids, you never know what's gonna happen, and just be ready.
Our camp is split into different units. We would go on 3 to 4 day camping trips where it would be like rock climbing, canoeing, biking, hiking. On one of the camping trips that I mentioned, I was on a canoeing trip. I was in the back. It was me and this other counselor with our partners who were campers. We were canoeing and the current was really strong. We were getting pushed like towards the edge of the river right into like where this tree had fallen down. I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, but when we get over there, we'll turn and we'll be good. The closer and closer we got, the canoe who was in front of us waited till like the last minute to get out of the way of the tree. So my partner and I had no time to turn and get out of the way. So we kind of went just straight under the tree. So here we are in our canoe, like in branches basically. The canoe with the other counselor behind us comes the exact same way that we did, but we weren't able to move out of the way because we were stuck in the branch, so we collided. Now instead of us colliding where we were just like bumped, their canoe, and the current was so strong that their canoe came, hit ours, and then went under us. And thank God that we were wearing life jackets, but the counselor and the camper both came up out of the water like 2 to 3 seconds after. And the counselor turns to me and goes, Michael, you need to get out of your canoe. Something's wrong with my foot. So I jump out of my canoe and I can't hold on to my canoe and the branch because the current's so strong. So I look to my partner, who was a camper, and I was like, are you okay with floating down the river by yourself? She was like, yes, I'm totally fine. And she's floating away and I'm like, make sure you get some help. Then I pull my focus to the other counselor's foot. The canoe was getting pushed by the current into the counselor's like ankle basically, and then his ankle was being pushed into the branch. So he was stuck. Went underwater, felt around, and I tried to push, and every time I did, the counselor would like cry in pain or wince. He was able to kind of wiggle his foot out while I pulled the branch away. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, the other counselors know what's going on. They like called someone to come help us. So we were sitting there on the branch for like 30 to 45 minutes. Not only did the canoe sink, the tree that we were on also started sinking. I grab onto one of the branches, the camper is grabbing onto my life jacket, and then my other counselor is grabbing onto her life jacket. We one by one kind of like float. We see this patch of open sand kind of like through this shrub. We climb through these like thorny bushes as if it couldn't get any worse. Mosquitoes. The most mosquitoes I've ever seen, and my other counselor decided to go like a little bit into the forest to see if he could see anything. He comes back with so many mosquito bites on his face. I was like, we can't stay here any longer. Let's just try to float down the river, see if we find anyone that we know. All of us are like linked arms, and we get back into the water and float down the river for maybe like 3 minutes before we see two heads coming this way. And it was two of the other counselors rowing upstream. We finally catch up to them. We kind of like console the camper because it was kind of a traumatic experience. And then with the other counselor's phone, we call camp, and the counselor and I both started talking to them, and we both started crying because we had no time to process what had just happened to us. Looking back on it, I think of how lucky we were that no one got stuck underwater. We were all wearing life jackets. It's kind of like the scariest and most dangerous situation I've ever been in, but now it's kind of like, well, look what I did. Like, I'm so strong and brave.
One summer, as a camp counselor, I went on a float tubing trip down the river with my campers. And this is just where you sit in an inflatable tube, float down the river, have a really great time. And it's supposed to be really relaxing and enjoyable, and for the most part, it was. But about halfway through, I was in the back of the herd with some co-staff of mine who are my really close friends, and I went to scratch my back. And I looked at my hand afterwards, and there was a baby leech on it. So I kind of started to freak out, and I touched my back again, and there were even more baby leeches. I then started crying, and I flipped over onto my stomach, and my friends started gasping, and I was like, you need to tell me what is going on right now. And they were like, you have baby leeches and some adult ones all over your back. And so I'm bawling, and thankfully we had a couple lifeguards with us that were in kayaks, so I call over a lifeguard, and thankfully he had a tweezers in his first aid kit, so he pulled those out, and I attached my tube to my friend's tube, and she starts tweezing the leeches off of me. I was crying, sitting there, and then I think, oh, so the leeches that are on me are on the part of my back that was underwater. Does that mean that my butt also has leeches on them? And then I started crying even more, because I touched my butt, and sure enough, there were baby leeches. So while I'm floating down the river, surrounded by campers and all my co-staff, I have to take off my bathing suit bottoms to get those leeches off. And my camper is holding my hand while I'm sobbing. We went on floating down the river, I'm getting tweezed, and finally my friends don't think they can see anymore. I hang on to the kayak that one of the lifeguards is in, and she brings me to shore, and I get out and my supervisor's there, and I was like, I need to see a doctor now. I think I have leeches up my butt. And she was like, excuse me? I was like, I have leeches maybe inside of me, and then I start crying again. And so I put on some normal clothes, got in the car, and I went back to camp to see a doctor. I get there, and somehow everyone at camp has heard about this situation, and I hadn't told anyone. So everyone's coming up to me being like, oh, I heard you had 45 leeches on you. What do you mean 45 leeches? I didn't have that many. And they're like, oh, that's just what I heard. And I come to find out later when I got back to the campsite where all my campers and co-staff were staying that sure enough, there were 45 leeches on me, and I just was in so much of a panic that I had no idea. I finally get to see the doctor, and the cherry on top was that I come to find out that the doctor is my camper's dad. He was so nice, so helpful. He told me that he had done some research and that I had probably floated through a nest of baby leeches. It should be fine, like they're not harmful. So that was really reassuring, and he told me to take a really good shower check the toilet after I go to the bathroom, and everything was fine and it turned out okay. But in that moment, it was terrifying, and I've never experienced something like that before in my life. Floating down a river getting leeches squeezed off of you is not fun.